Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Thank you for joining. So we are towards the end of the fifth chapter of the fifth canto, the teachings of Lord Rishabdev. So quick recap. The chapter begins with the glorification of the human life, an emphasis on the importance of human life, from the perspective that this is the form in which one can end the cycle of transmigration. Then Rishabdev speaks about transcending illusion and the process of attaining liberation. And so he talks about the gradual process of first giving up impious activities in favor of pious, giving up pious activities in favor of Gyan, which essentially is described as the process of attaining liberation, and then later on giving up Gyan in the favor of Bhakti. Then Rishabdev speaks about the responsibilities of a leader and brings the attention to the eldest son, Bharat. He then speaks about the importance of unity, that how the Lord and his devotees are in one family. So the need to be devoid of envy. Because as the Acharyas comment, that the brothers might object to following their own brother as a leader. Even though Bharat was the eldest, but surrendering to him is difficult. So Rishabdev speaks about the importance of being free from envy and having the sense of belonging to the same family. Family means that being united in purpose, mutual welfare. Then Rishabdev begins to glorify the Brahmanas. So the point that he makes is that even the leaders are not independent. That the leaders are known by the fact that they also follow the Brahmanas. And the glory of the Brahmanas is that even they are not independent. They follow the scriptures, they follow other Brahmanas, and ultimately they follow the Lord. Right? So we were towards the concluding part of the glory of the Brahmanas. So resuming our discussion from verse 24. Dhritatano rushati me purane yene hasatvam paramam pavitram samodamaha satyam anugrascha tapastitikshanubhavascha. Prem Kishore Prabhu, could you read the translations? Thank you.
The Vedas are my eternal transcendental sound incarnation. Therefore, the Vedas are Shabda Brahma. In this world, the Brahmanas thoroughly study all the Vedas, and because they assimilate the Vedic conclusions, they are also to be considered the Vedas personified. The Brahmanas are situated in the supreme transcendental mode of nature. sattva guna. Because of this, they are fixed in mind control, sense control, and truthfulness. They describe the Vedas in their original sense, and out of mercy, they preach the purpose of the Vedas to all conditioned souls. They practice penance, tapasya, and tolerance, tiksha, and they realize the position of the living entity and the Supreme Lord, Anubhava. These are the 8 qualifications of the Brahmanas. Therefore, among all living entities, no one is superior to the Brahmanas.
So here the Lord is he's doing a couple of things over here. How do we recognize a Brahman? Because he is saying that first he talked about the qualities of a leader. And because so that you can recognize them and follow a person who manifests those qualities. One of the qualities of the leader is that they themselves follow the Brahmanas. So the natural question is that what are the qualities of the Brahmanas? So the notion of Brahmanas being born in Brahmana family has already been disambiguated. There is nothing like a Brahman by birth. So the focus is now on what is the behavior of the Brahman. So this verse, it covers 2 aspects. First, the Lord is stating that what is the reason that the Brahmanas are to be followed by everyone, including the leaders, right? So he gives 4 reasons. He says that the Lord incarnates in the sound form as the Vedas, and therefore another name for the Lord is Shabda Brahma. Actually 3 reasons. First 2 are part of the same reason. So the Brahmanas are special because they study the Vedas, right? So the first part is glorifying the Vedas. That the Vedas are the sound incarnation of the Lord, Shabda Brahma. Right? And because the Brahmanas study the Vedas, they are special. Then they assimilate the Vedas. So assimilate the Vedas meaning that they not only study the Vedas, they act according to the Vedas. So they are considered to be the personification of the Vedas. There's a difference between studying something and exemplifying that thing. Right? One can study all the books on morality, but still be an immoral person. The Brahmanas, they not only do they study the Vedas, but they act according to the Vedas. That's why they're known as the personification of the Vedas. That's why they should be followed. The third reason is that they understand the real purpose of the Vedas and explain to the others. Right? So one may study the Vedas, one may assimilate the Vedas, but one may not understand the Vedanta, and one may not explain it to others. Now, how can you follow the purpose? And there are people who may follow the Vedas without understanding the real purpose of the Vedas. Or there may be some who may understand the real purpose of the Vedas, but they do not care to explain to others. So the Bhajananandis come in that category. That even though they are advanced, even though they are mature on the path of liberation, but one is generally not asked to follow the Bhajananandis because there is a danger of becoming a Sahajya. we will see in the life of Rishabdev himself that in his later stage of life, he was fulfilling the first set of conditions. Now he's the Lord, of course, but even in the role of a king, he studied the Vedas, he assimilated it, personified it, understood the real purpose, but he was doing Ajgar Niti. Right? He did not really care to explain to others. So as a result, what happened? That people who followed him incorrectly, which later on gave birth to Jainism, which is considered to be a deviation of the teachings of Rishabdev, or people were not following. Right? And of course, Rishabdev did not enter that phase in order to mislead people, but for a different reason that we will study when we reach that part. But here, the characteristics of the Brahman that makes them worthy of being followed are given. The three characteristics: that they study the Vedas, they personify the Vedas, they understand the real purpose of the Vedas, and they explain the Vedas to others. Right? Therefore, the Brahmanas are not different from the Lord, because the Lord started off by saying that I am the Veda. Right? That the Vedas are considered to be Shabd Brahma. That means I am not different from the Vedas. And then he ends up by saying that the Brahmanas are not different from the Vedas, which transitively means that the Brahmanas are not different from the Lord. And actually, the Brahmanas are superior to the Lord because of the last reason, that they explain it to others. The Lord explains it to everybody. But the Brahmanas, they show special mercy. Now at this point, you'll probably understand that the word Brahmanas and Vaishyas, not Vaishyas, sorry, and Vaishnavas is being used interchangeably. That even though it's being said Brahman, but in terms of the quality, the description is that of Vaishnavas, especially the Vaishnavas who preach. So that's why they're called superior to the Lord, because while the Lord distributes his bhakti, he does it impartially. However, the Brahmanas, they will run after people and they will beg them to take bhakti. The quality which the Lord does not manifest because of his vow of impartiality, but he nevertheless appreciates. Now, having described the super excellent qualities of the Brahmanas, the Lord then gives 8 attributes that can help one recognize the Brahman. So he says that they are Sattvam Paramam, that they are situated in the pure mode of goodness. So amongst the 8 qualities, 6 qualities are more in the nature of Satogun. They are qualities of mode of goodness. Samodama, Satyam, Anugraha. So these are more qualities that are in the mode of goodness. We see in Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter, right, where Krishna says that Samodamas tapas socham kshantir arjavatam evachaha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. Right? He says that gives these qualities: peacefulness, austerity, self-control, tolerance. So here also we see 6 qualities: Sama, which is control of mind; Dhamma, control of the senses; Satyam, being truthful; Anugraha, being merciful; Tapaha, being austere; and Titiksha, being tolerant. And then 2 qualities, Sattvam Paramam, that they're not in the mode of goodness, but in the mode of pure goodness, right? Which is basically goodness without the contamination of the material mode, and anubhava. So anu means to follow, and bhava means emotion or realization. So anubhav means that they have realized the position of the jiva and the Lord, right? So this is samandhya, that they have understood who the Lord is, who the jiva is. So this gives us a sense that these qualities belong to Vaishnavas who are beyond the mode of goodness. Srila Prabhupada notes that because the Brahmanas preached like the Lord and in accordance with the wishes of the Lord, he holds them so dearly to himself. And then he said, there are those who do Vapu Seva. So Vapu Seva is deity worship, Archa Vigraha, and Vani Seva. Vani Seva is preaching. Both of them are dear to the Lord, but of the two, the latter is dear. So between Vapu and Vani, Vani is always considered to be superior. Whether it's in association by Vapu and association by Vani, Vani is considered to be superior. Similarly, Seva, Vapu Seva and Vani Seva is considered to be superior. So Prabhupada says that Shri Krishna himself is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, personally descends into the universe from the spiritual kingdom to teach conditioned souls about the values of spiritual life. He tries to induce them to surrender unto him. Similarly, the Brahmanas do the same thing. After assimilating the Vedic instruction, they assist the Supreme Lord in his endeavor to deliver conditioned souls. The Brahmanas are very dear to the Supreme Lord due to their high sattva-guna qualities. And they always engage in welfare activities for all the conditioned souls in the material world. Okay. Verse 25. Matoppi anantata parata parasmata svarga pavarga dipaterna kinchet yesham kim yushada itarena tesham akin. I think Prem Kishore Prabhu, you need to mute yourself. Thank you. Okay, let me read it again. Matopyanantata parata parasmata svarga pavarga vipaterna kinchat yesham kim yushada itarena tesham akinchanam mai bhakti bhajam.
I am fully opulent, almighty, and superior to Lord Brahma and Indra, the king of the heavenly planets. I am also the bestower of all happiness obtained in the heavenly kingdom and by liberation. Nonetheless, the Brahmanas do not seek material comforts from me. They are very pure and do not want to possess anything. They simply engage in my devotional service. What is the need of their asking for material benefits from anyone else?
So in the previous verse, Lord Rishabdev had said, so he had given 8 qualities which made the Brahmanas who they are. He talked about the superiority of the Brahmanas because of the 8 qualities, the samadama, tapa, and because they embody the Vedas, right? Here he gives 4 additional qualifications of the Brahmanas. So these qualities are manifested more in the, so there are some qualities that a person manifests because of his inclination, proclivity. And there are some qualities that the person manifests in their action. Right? So a person may be temperamentally quiet. Right? So that may be the personality of the person. And but in times of strife, the person might get agitated. Right? So even though his quality is one of being peaceful, but when there is strife, there is quarrel, he may get agitated. So there are qualities that the persons manifest in how they live their life. So these are the further embellishments to the qualities of the Brahmanas. So the first quality is that they have no material aspirations. And the Lord says that even though they worship Krishna, and Krishna is the most opulent, but they themselves have no material aspirations, right? Second is that they do not desire liberation, even though Krishna is the only bestower of liberation. Third is they are without possessions, even though everything belongs to Krishna. And fourth is that they simply worship the Lord. So this, even though is to show that their only motivation to worship the Lord is because of their attraction to the Lord. So at one point, so somebody may worship somebody for wealth or for mystic opulences, like the yogis worship Lord Shiva to get mystic opulences, worship Brahma to get different elevated material positions, Lakshmi Devi for opulences. So they try to get some, the particular deity has some prowess, they try to get a portion of that prowess. Right? In the Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that those who desire wealth worship Lakshmi Devi, those who desire a good wife worship Umapati, those who desire fame worship Surya Dev. So because those devas have some of these qualities, so they are worshipped in order to get those qualities. Here we see that even though the Lord is the most opulent, the Brahmanas worship him with no material aspirations. Even though he is the bestower of liberation, they do not desire liberation. Even though Ishavasya Idam Sarvam, even though everything belongs to the Lord, the Brahmanas have no material possessions. So what remains? That Mai Bhakti Bhajam, that their only motivation in worshipping me is a desire to worship me. So now it becomes even more clear that the real Brahmanas are the devotees of the Lord. Not just those who know the Vedas, who manifest the qualities given in the Vedas, who have understood the essence of the Vedas, but they are those who exclusively worship the Lord with no material desires. Right? So we see that we see the definition of bhakti emerging in these two verses, Anibhilashita Shunyam, right? So no other desires other than the worship of the Lord. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that in this verse, the Lord is asserting that his devotees are the best. They are the worthiest of worship. Right? And they do not pray for mundane needs from him, even though he is unlimited. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that not only do they not worship, go to the Lord for mundane needs, they also never go to others for mundane needs. So he said they are far less inclined to go to devas like Brahma and Shiva and Durga for material needs. So their focus is on the Lord, but even from the Lord, they don't ask for material needs, far less from his representatives. So why do they do what they do? What is the motivation? Vishwanath Chakravarti says their only goal is the sweet qualities of the Lord. They are without possessions, having given up all their possessions, including their very identity, to the Lord. And by giving everything up, they are now full. Right? So this is a little bit of a poetic license that Vishwanath Chakravarti takes over here, that they give up everything and thus they become full. So they give up their material possessions and they become full of spiritual opulences. So in terms of the glorifications of the Brahmins, in the third canto, Lord Kapila also glorifies the Brahman. He said the Brahmins are, this is in 329.33, that the Brahmanas are always dedicated to the Lord's service with their bodies, mind, and word. There is no better person than a Brahman who thus engages himself and dedicates himself to the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada notes that these verses, they describe the perfect Brahmanical qualification. Akinchana mai bhakti bhajam. Right? Akinchan means without any material possessions. Mai bhakti bhajam. That they're always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Right? So one can understand this by one of two ways, that they give up all their material possessions and take to the worship of the Lord, considering them as impediments, or having taken to the devotional service of the Lord, they have no material wants. They do not possess material things. Why? Because the Lord is taking care of everything. So in an earlier stage, the devotees, they minimize the material needs so that they can channel their space and time and energy into devotional service. Later on, they do not feel the need of it because they're experiencing the higher taste. Prabhupada further explains that in Madhya Leela 11.8, Mahaprabhu explains the position of pure Vaishnavas who are anxious to return back home to Godhead, Nishkanchanasya Bhagavat Bhajano Mukhasya. That those who actually want to return back to Godhead are Nishkinchan. They have no desire for material comfort. Okay, so this is the end of the glorification of the Brahmanas. Now let's go to the next verse, 26. Sarvanimad Dishnantya Bhavat Vish Charani Bhutani Suta Druvani Sambhavitavyanni Pade Padevo Vivik Tadrigbis Taduharanam Me.
My dear sons, you should not envy any living entity, be he moving or non-moving. Knowing that I am situated in them, you should offer respect to all of them at every moment. In this way, you offer respect to me.
So in two verses, 26 and 27, Rishabdev now instructs that one should respect all living entities and engage in bhakti. So the reason he does that is that in the previous set of verses, he is becoming more and more exclusive in who should be followed. Like he talked about the qualities of the leader, so he narrowed the scope. Then he said the leader should follow the Brahmanas. He talks about the qualities of the Brahmanas, further narrowed the scope, elevated the Brahmanas to the position of the devotees, further narrowed the scope. Now, in order to make sure that a person does not misinterpret this instruction, saying that I will only worship the Brahmanas and neglect everybody else. Right? So when somebody says that only the Brahmanas are worthy of worship, then they might draw this corollary that everybody else is worthy of the opposite of worship. Right? Sometimes we see that, especially in new devotees, that they start becoming very disrespectful to those who are not practicing devotees. Right? In the earlier days, there were many terms that were used very disparagingly, that these are just karmis, they are all meat eaters, they are all bound to hell. So there were different terms, maybe not necessarily inaccurate, but nevertheless, they were creating this schism, they were creating this partition, that when we are in the company of devotees, then you understand that they are special and render all respect and service. But when you're not in the company of devotees, then you are in this mentality that now I am associating with demons. Now I'm associating with those who are heading to the lower species or lower planets. Right? And because of this, the devotees were developing what like a Jekyll and Hyde personality. That when they were with devotees, they were very, very respectful, with a service attitude. Right? But when they were outside the devotee association, then they were very contemptuous. They would talk disparagingly. There were many devotees who they offended their families. They would talk about their own family members in insulting terms. I come from a family of meat eaters. I come from a family of asuras, etc. And Srila Prabhupada was very particular. So it's a razor's edge. That while you want to make sure that one understands the position of the Vaishnavas, but it should not accompany the mistreatment of those who are not Vaishnavas. For one reason, you do not know who's a Vaishnava and who's not a Vaishnava. And the second is that one should not act in a way that might turn a person away from Krishna consciousness. Right? So even if the person is not a devotee, but when he sees devotees insulting them, talking bad about them, making fun of them, then in their mind, they will develop antipathy towards the devotees and antipathy towards Krishna, which is opposite to why Krishna appreciates the devotees, right? We saw that in the previous verse, Prabhupada talking about the fact that because the devotees preach the name of Krishna, they are dear to Krishna. Now, by their explicit or implicit action, if they're doing the opposite, then that definition of being a devotee is violated. So Rishabdev is making sure that because of the statements that he has made, people do not become polarized in their behavior. So in 2 verses, he says that it is important to show respect to everyone. So he says, be it moving or non-moving, any living entity. Right? So not only humans, non-moving is plants or the lower animal forms. So he draws a wide circle that all living entities should be worshipped with pure vision and without envy. So then one may say, how is it possible that there are so many kinds of living entities, many of them envious, not only just amongst humans, but others? So Rishabdev gives the answer that you should see me residing in all of them. Right? He says, Mat Hishantya, that you should, because you have affection for me, when you see me residing in all of them, you will naturally have affection for all of them. So this is similar to the vision of the yogi in the 6th chapter. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he gives Shastric references to elaborate on this point. So he says that firstly, one should understand that the Lord is situated in everyone and everywhere as Paramatma. Everywhere, because this also includes non-moving entities. So everyone and everywhere, the Lord is situated as Paramatma. Then just as we offer respects to the deity in the temple, the Lord in the Paramatma form should also be respected. So having the Paramatma vision is a lot more superior than having the Atma vision. With the Atma vision, there is still this trace of discrimination. Because if one sees the other as a soul, it is far more superior from seeing one at the bodily platform, but still there is this understanding that the reason that this soul has this body is because of the activities of the soul. So there is still some discrimination, that the reason this soul is sitting in a chandal, in a dog or a dog eater, is because the soul performed impious activities. And that is why they have gotten this degraded form. So there is still some sense of discrimination. But in the Paramatma form, there is no discrimination, because the Paramatma is sitting in the Brahmana, is sitting in the Chanda. Right? So when one has developed this vision, then one automatically loves everyone. So with the Atma Ram vision, with the vision of Atma, one stops hating others because of a low birth or a degraded body. With the Paramatma vision, one starts loving everyone. So it's like a father has a favorite son, and when the son goes and lives in somebody's house, then automatically the father becomes very favorable to that house. So similarly, because the devotees are very favorably inclined to the Paramatma, when they see that the same Paramatma is residing in different forms, they become favorably inclined. So Prabhupada makes this comment that we should not make any particular distinction between the poor and the rich, like the foolish worshippers of Daridra Narayan. And so this term Daridra Narayan was, it was used a lot by Mahatma Gandhi, but it was quoted by, or it was coined by Swami Vivekananda in his effort to, I guess in his effort to draw help to the poor, right? But in doing so, he was violating the basic tenets of spirituality, right? So Prabhupada says Narayan is present in the rich as well as the poor. One should not simply think Narayan is situated only among the poor. He is everywhere. And an advanced devotee will offer respects to everyone, even to cats and dogs, right? If somebody says Daridra Narayan, then one begins to hate those who are not Daridra. And one begins to also consider that Narayan only is there in the poor, which is shastrically incorrect and experientially will also result in that rag and dvesh. Even though the rag now is to the poor and the dvesh is to the rich, but envy is envy regardless of who the subject of the envy is. Right. So Rishabdev is instructing here that respect everybody, seeing me in them, but especially follow the Vaishnavas. Next verse, and after that we'll stop for any discussion. Mano vachodrak karane hitasya sakshat kratam me paribranami vina pumanyena mahavimoha kritan pashan na vimoktameshe.
The true activity of the sense organs, mind, sight, words, and all the knowledge gathering and working senses is to engage fully in my service. Unless his senses are thus engaged, a living entity cannot think of getting out of the great entanglement of material existence, which is exactly like Yamaraja's stringent rope.
So in this verse, Rishabdev concludes the subject by describing the general quality of bhakti and saying that there cannot be liberation without bhakti, right? By engaging the mind, sight, words, and other senses belonging to the body in the worship of the Lord, one can attain liberation. Without this, there will be repeated birth and death, and one can never be freed from general illusion. So the point to be noted here is that earlier on we saw that the Rishabdev was glorifying the Vaishnava because they're not interested in liberation, and here he's seemingly glorifying liberation, right? That the true activity of mind, sight, words, and knowledge gathering senses is to engage fully in my service. So it's not that that the devotees are averse to liberation, right? It's just that for them, liberation is a byproduct of bhakti. So if you look at the verbiage of this verse, very, very similar to a verse in the Narad Pancharatra, Sarupadi Vinirmukta Tat Prathvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. And by giving up all Sarupadi, by giving up all your upadhis, Tat Prathvena Nirmalam. And in that mode of having given up all material associations, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. Prabhupada says that this is the conclusion of bhakti. So it is in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this verse, Sarupadi Vinirmuktam Tatvatva Nirmalam, is considered to be a paraphrasing, or maybe we put it the other way around. The verse by Rupa Goswami, Anivilashita Shunyam Jnanakaramavi Anavratam, is considered to be a paraphrase of Sarupadi Vinirmukta Tatpratvena Nirmalam. And there is, there are the acharyas, they will break each and every aspect of this verse and Anavilashita Shunyam, and they will show that how they are completely talking about the same thing. So Prabhupada says that this is the conclusion of bhakti. All the time, Lord Rishabhdev has been stressing devotional service. And now he's concluding by saying that all the senses should be engaged in the Lord's service. There are 5 senses by which we gather knowledge and 5 senses with which we work. These 10 senses and the mind should be fully engaged in the Lord's service. Without engaging them in this way, one cannot get out of the clutches of Maya. Right? So this is one of the definitions of liberation, which is being liberated from the clutches of Maya. So even the devotees aspire for it. They want to get out of the clutches of Maya because they want to purify their execution of devotional service. Not so that they enter Brahman or even enter Vaikuntha. They desire liberation from Maya so that their bhakti becomes unimpeded. Right? So Sevanam Bhakti Uchyate. Okay, so I'll pause over here and see if there is any comments or discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I don't know how to formulate this question. Basically, it is a clarification. Probably among most of us over here who are Brahmanas initiated, right? Due to past pious or whatever the karma we had in prior lives, we got first thing is human. Then we are a devotee as well right now. And it's not even though we are not born Brahmanas, most of them, right? Like at least how to take this? Definitely we are not performing these kind of rules, what we say, what a Brahmana should be. We are striving for as a sadhaka. So how to understand? We are claiming that to be as a Brahmana, but I don't know how to act upon. That's the clarification.
Yes, you are right. We are so we are initiated into this, which means that we are trying to develop the qualities of the Brahman. We are following the path that is recommended for the Brahmanas. It does not necessarily mean that we have all perfected it. Hopefully, at some point we will. But the qualities of being tolerant and equipoised and equivision, these are qualities that we are trying to cultivate in ourselves, or we are seeing these qualities manifest in ourselves because of the practice of bhakti. And we definitely see that in devotees, these qualities are more prominent. They may not be manifested fully. Devotees may get agitated, or devotees may quarrel, or they may have greed for things. Which just means, as you were saying, that we are Brahman initiated means that we have been initiated on that path. So, which means that we are now qualified to try and develop those qualities. Like Prabhupada would talk about initiation as equivalent to getting admission. That you get admission in an engineering college does not mean that you're an engineer. It just means that you're qualified to study the courses over there and eventually become an engineer. So that's how we are. For some it takes shorter time, some it takes longer time, but the path is there.
Thank you, Prabhu. A follow-up question, actually. Like, definitely it is, as you rightly said, the striving part, right? Like, there's a subtle line over there, whether it is on the responsibility side, mostly on this, whether you call it as a desires or the responsibility, right? We do tend not to show those Brahmanical qualities. But if you're striving, again, if I say that, oh, I do not want to have this car or house, if I don't know if it is a desire or if it is where there is, I don't know where does it stand. The other part is, as a Brahman, even after knowing all this, the second part of the question, we do a lot of anarthas, I can say, call it sinful or knowingly doing those. Will it lead to, I think it is a lot of problems rather than unknowingly doing it, right?
Um, so I guess the question is that, and maybe let me extrapolate the question, because it's not an uncommon question, that if with knowledge your culpability increases, your accountability increases, is it better to stay ignorant? Right. So the flip side of it is that with knowledge, the ability to advance also increases. So they both go hand in hand. So one may choose to remain ignorant, and it's something that we experience in people around us, or to not just devotees, but amongst others also. You try to talk to somebody about spirituality, and then they say, I don't want to be bothered by it. All I know is, and fill in the blank, right? All I know is do good to others. All I know is take care of my family, etc. To some extent, there is fear that so far I've been performing activities unknowingly, so maybe my culpability is less. If I know it, then my reactions will increase. So that fear keeps them away from that. See that also amongst, when you're cultivating people, there are some people who will, for a very, very long time, they will stay on the fringes. They will not take to chanting. They will like devotee sangha, but they will not take to chanting. They will not take to deity worship, because of this fear that if we take to it, then we have all these material desires, and now we will be held accountable for them. So far, we are not devotees, so we are not accountable for them. Maybe there is some truth, because yes, with more awareness, your accountability increases, and that's the price you make for advancement. So with more awareness, also the potential of advancement increases. Right? So that's essentially the price that you pay. And in a real sense, it's not even the price that you pay, because with more awareness, the fall downs will become less frequent. The regret on the fall downs will become more genuine. So I was listening to this lecture by Radhika Raman Prabhu, and he was making this comment that if you read any of the scriptures, the Puranas, the Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, what are they? Essentially, they are all compilations of fall downs, and not just of the ordinary people like us. They're fall downs of exalted people like Brahma and Indra and Gajendra, or Indradumna, very, very exalted people, the fall down. So why does and then the sages say, come and listen to Bhagavatam, and then they say you should not indulge in Vaishnava Ninda, and then what do they talk about? One fall down after another fall down, because the glory is in the redemption after the fall down. That's what makes the devotees special. Not that they will never fall down. They will fall down, but they will get up, either by themselves or by the help of others. Right? So that's where the glory of devotional service comes into play.
Thank you, Prabhu. The last statement was wonderful.
Thank you,
Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It is true even in the material realm that as one grow up in the ladder, corporate ladder, one's responsibility as well as culpability also increases. is it not? So it's not just in the spiritual realm, it's same thing in the material realm also. I was thinking that that is true, but because of that, one does not deny promotion. Say, I don't want to be take the higher position. So in general, people aspire for the higher position, but in some cases they are satisfied at the lower levels. But mostly, so similarly on the spiritual side also, even though the culpability is there, we should not be denying that that progress in spirituality. That's something I was thinking. And there was one thing that when you were still talking about some people always live in the fringe. They associate with the devotees, but they never take to the process of chanting or deity worship or anything. One time it's like that one person came and he was trying to take next step, and he came to the gift shop to buy Gaurnita deities. And myself, my wife is in charge of the gift shop, so she was willing to give, no problem. At that time, one senior devotee came into the gift shop. He's a Brahmana initiated, he's a pujari and things like that. He's a very senior devotee, and he came and then he was talking to this person and discouraged him. If you're taking Gaurnita deities, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then he said, okay, I'm not taking. So he went away. Now we don't even see him in the temple. So we were thinking, what is right, what is wrong? Prabhupada says Gaurnita deities can be kept as even a doll. And this Brahmana would argue saying that, if you knowingly give that person is not going to take care of the deities, then the offense will come to you. You will be committing sin. So therefore, when you know this person may not take care of it, don't give them deities. That's what he was telling. So what is I don't understand how to go about these things. On the one hand, culpability. We are talking about the culpability and responsibility here. Can you please enlighten us? What would be the, maybe it's a specific question, but some principle may be involved in this.
Thank you, Prabhu. So between philosophy and preaching, there is this connection of practicality. Philosophy is simple and straightforward. Preaching is not simple and straightforward. Right? We have this famous examples of Prabhupada giving contrary instructions to sannyasis. You go and you don't stay in one place for more than 3 days. You travel around and preach. Next sannyasi came. And you don't travel. You just stay in one place and do deity worship. Right? So same ashram, same movement, contrary instructions. Right? So preaching is the mother of preaching, so to speak, is practicality. That what is the practical application of philosophy over here? Srila Prabhupada himself said, give Gaurnita deities, even if they're eating meat in their house, give them Gaurnita deities, they're most merciful. Now, that was in a context when it was mass preaching, right? So it does not mean that in the temple we go around saying that, take Gaurnita deities and eat meat or whatever it is. Like, I'll give you my personal example that before I was initiated, I was aspiring. So like everyone, we developed the desire to worship Gaurnita. And at that time, standards were a little bit more, at least for Guru Maharaj, he had more tough standards. So we didn't ask him directly, we asked other senior devotees, his disciples, and they said, no, Maharaj doesn't like to give deities to his disciples unless they're initiated. But we were at that stage that we were really wanted to worship Gaurnita deities. So we went around asking everybody that, so like you were saying, you would read from Shikshamrita, Leela Amrita, Prabhupada saying Gaurnita deities can be given to everyone. Why can't they be given to us? And finally, by the intervention of another senior devotee who was mentoring us, Maharaj agreed. He said, okay, you can take Gaurnita deities. But it so happened that we got them both at the same time. We got our initiation at the same time and qualified deities also at the same time. So in that context, when there are devotees who are, when you see that there are devotees who are hopefully for the long run, who are basically being cultivated to be staying in the movement for the long time, then the way that you would develop them would be a little different from those that may be here, may not be here, right? So the importance of preaching is and this I'm quoting from one person who's devotee, who's actually a very effective preacher, that the importance of preaching is to do whatever is needed to develop Krishna consciousness in that person. And that's the link between the philosophy and practicality. When you come to the temple, and when the devotees at the temple, who stay at the temple, they almost, without even knowing, they evaluate the person, that what is the best way to preach to this person, right? For some, they will say that we will come and do home programs in their house. For some, they will say, oh Prabhu, pots need to be clean. For them, they will say, Prabhu, the temple accounts need to be taken care of, right? And different people engage in different ways. Their engagement may be different, but the unifying thread is that the engagement results in them making some advancement in Krishna consciousness. But I do confess that these are not simple questions to answer. These are philosophy is relatively simple, but the practical application of philosophy, very difficult to give overarching answers for them.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol Varshana.
Sorry, I have a sore throat, so I'm not super clear, I think. But this progression of verses, I was thinking of the 10th canto when Krishna was entering Mathura. He met Sudama, the florist, I think, and the Lord was so pleased with him, and he said, "What would you like?" And Sudama asked for 3 things: devotion to Krishna, friendship with devotees, and compassion to all living entities. And I thought those were 3 things that seems to have come up, in this section that Rishabhadev was talking about. So I just thought I'll share that.
It's a very good point. Very good point. Good correlation. Thank you. Okay, moving forward, I wanted to keep maybe what's the time here to 4, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and early, so that wanted to have a little bit of discussion on the mock session, etc. So just to let you know that we'll probably end around maybe around another 15 minutes. And then we can stop the recording and have a little bit of discussion on that. Okay, moving on to verse 28. This is a prose, so I won't read the verse. I'll have just Prem Kishore Prabhu read the translation.
Sukhdev Goswami said, "Thus the great well-wisher of everyone, the Supreme Lord Rishabdev, instructed his own sons. Although they were perfectly educated and cultured, he instructed them just to set an example of how a father should instruct his sons before retiring from family life. Sannyasis who are no longer bound by fruitive activity and who have taken to devotional service after all their material desires have been vanished, also learn by these instructions. Lord Rishabdev instructed his 100 sons, of whom the eldest Bharata was a very advanced devotee and a follower of Vaishnavas. In order to rule the whole world, the Lord enthroned his eldest son on the royal seat. Therefore, all the still at home, Lord Rishabdev lived like a madman, naked and with disheveled hair. Then the Lord took the sacrificial fire within himself and he left Brahmavarta to tour the whole world.
So from here till the end of the chapter is a description of the renunciation of Lord Rishabdev as an Avaduta. So the first part of the verse gives us a little bit of sense of who is the recipient of the instructions of Rishabdev. And so it is said that it is said here that sannyasis who are no longer bound by fruitive activities and who have taken to devotional service after all their material desires have been vanquished also learn by these instructions. Right? And Prabhupada expands on it, saying that actually the instructions given to Lord Rishabdev's sons were not exactly meant for his sons because they were already educated and highly advanced. Rather, they were meant for sannyasis who intend to become advanced devotees. Because he kind of, even though he starts from the lower rung, from impiety to piety to knowledge, but he culminates at a fairly exalted level of where one is already has already transcended material contaminations. So his instructions are especially meant for renunciants, right? And what do the instructions help these renunciants? To advance in the path of bhakti. Right? So Prabhupada said that sannyasis must abide by Lord Rishabdev's instructions while on the path of devotional service. And so the first half of the verse gives us a summary of the instruction, but not really a summary of the instructions, but perspective on the instructions. That who are they meant for? They're meant for people who are already at an exalted state. Doesn't mean that everybody else ignores them. Everybody can benefit from them. But like Prem Kishore Prabhu was saying that these instructions look like they are that they're not meant for us. They're meant for someone at an exalted platform, which is true, but they're also meant for us. So that for those at an advanced level, the instructions may be actionable. For us, it may be aspirational, that we would aspire to be like this. And by aspiring, we cultivate those qualities. Then, what did Rishabdev do after instructing his sons? He says that he took the sacrificial fire within himself. So as a grahastha, it is the duty of the grahastha, at least at that time, to perform yajna. Now, when the grahastha becomes a vanaprastha or a sannyasi, even a vanaprastha, I think they're supposed to do some levels of yajna, but when they become sannyasis, then they take the sacrificial fire within themselves, which means that there is no need for them to perform the yajna anymore. Right? They are now beyond the rules and regulations of the various kandas, karma kand, gyan kand, etc. of the Vedas. And then he left Brahmavarta to tour the whole world. Right? So depending on where you feel, so Brahmavarta is a portion of the universe. So he was now touring the entire world, living like a naked madman. So Srila Prabhupada actually says that Lord Rishabdev retired from family life and lived like a naked madman, even while still within his family. Right. So Sukdev Goswami said thereafter, although still at home, Lord Rishabdev lived like a madman, naked and with descent hair. So he renounced internally as opposed to external. Now, eventually, it's said that he left to tour the whole world, but he did not wait to separate himself from the family. Right? He did not wait for the external separation from the family. That, he said bye-bye to everybody, and, they left him in a jungle and came back, and then he started following it. But his renunciation had already begun. So even while within the family, he was no longer part of the family. Okay, we'll do a couple of more verses and then stop after that. Next verse, go ahead and read the translation, Prabhu.
After accepting the feature of Avaduta, a great saintly person without material cares, Lord Rishabdev passed through human society like a blind, deaf, and dumb man, an idle stone, a ghost, or a madman. Although people called him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone.
So these various adjectives are used to describe his behavioral traits. So he was blind in the sense that he was not attracted or repulsed by things around him. He was deaf in the sense that when people spoke to him with honor or dishonor, he did not care about it. He was dumb in the sense that he did not react. When people asked him questions or people cursed him, he did not curse them back. So he was dumb. He was idle in the sense that he did not have any engagement. He did not work to earn a living or to get food. So he was idle, and he behaved like a ghost or a madman. For a normal person, it is difficult to understand why a madman behaves that way. That's why they call it mad, because the behavior is unpredictable. And a ghost can be neither seen nor heard, nor will the ghost go speak. So he was, when he acted, people could not understand why he was acting that way. And for the most part, he was invisible to the people. He did not make any efforts to register in their perspectives. So all the people called him names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. So these are the qualities of an Avaduta. And Prabhupada says Avaduta refers to one who does not care for social conventions, particularly varnashram dharma. Right. So this is an important distinction that is made over here. Now, more important than this is understanding that the person do not care for varnashram dharma because they have already achieved the purpose of varnashram dharma. Right? Because one might say that even I don't care for varnashram dharma. That even though I am a brahmachari, I live like a grahastha. So I am also Avaduta. Sometimes, and you will see this sometimes in Braja, sometimes in other holy places, where so-called advanced spiritualists, they are acting in bewildering ways. They may be smoking, what is it called, ganja, like, they may be smoking or drinking intoxicants, or they may be living unclean lives. And then they say they are Avaduta, that we do not care for social conventions. Now, if a person is an Avaduta because they care so much for the Lord that they don't care for social convention, then they're properly situated. But in no other situation can the person be called Avaduta, then they are called pretenders. So Prabhupada says that one who has surpassed the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma is called Avaduta. Right? Surpassed means having gone through them, they have now exceeded them. Such a person has already surpassed the clutches of Maya. So here Prabhupada explains that why such a person is no longer obligated to follow Varnashram Dharma. Because the whole purpose of Varnashram Dharma is to protect against Maya. That when one is bound by the rules and regulations, one is protected from the material energy. But because such a person in an advanced stage is already beyond Maya, there's no need for them to follow Varnashram Dharma. They may follow just because, and Krishna gives the example in 3rd and 4th chapter to set examples to others for further purification, but they are not bound to follow. Okay, we'll do one more verse and then after that, stop. Go ahead and read the translation.
Rishabdev began to tour through cities, villages, mines, countrysides, valleys, gardens, military camps, cow pens, the homes of cowherd men, transient hotels, hills, forests, and hermitages. Wherever he traveled, all bad elements surrounded him, just as flies surround the body of an elephant coming from a forest. He was always being threatened, beaten, urinated upon, and spat upon. Sometimes people threw stones, stool, and dust at him, and sometimes people passed foul air before him. Thus people called him his many bad names and gave him a great deal of trouble. But he did not care about this, for he understood that the body is simply meant for such an end. He was situated on the spiritual platform, and being in his spiritual glory, he did not care for all these material insults. In other words, he completely understood that matter and spirit are separate, and he had no bodily conception. Thus, without being angry at anyone, he walked through the whole world alone.
So at one end, this verse is a little distressing to devotees when they see that the Lord is treated in this way, that he's being threatened and beaten and urinated upon and spat upon. People actually would pass stool upon him. So while it is distressing to the devotees, the Lord obviously does this for a purpose. And the purpose is revealed in the latter part of the verse, that he wanted to demonstrate how does a person who is situated on a spiritual platform behave. Right? So how does he behave? Such a person does not care for material insults. Now, here we don't see that, but elsewhere we'll see that just like the person does not care for material insults, he does not care for material glorification also. Right? Why? Because he completely understood that matter and spirit were separate. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that there is a certain fallacy in this, because Lord Rishabdev, being the personality of Godhead, had a spiritual body. So while this may be true for us, it was not true for Rishabdev. That his body was not made of matter. Like his body was Chinmay there. So we can understand this two ways. One way is Vishnu Chakravarti explains that while the body of Rishabdev was spiritual, but as the personality of Godhead, he is also the Vishwarupa, which means that this material universe is the body of the Paramatma. So the Lord considered the material universe with all the ingredients, including those that were inflicted upon him as separate. Right. So now Vishnu Chakravarti is pointing more to the material body of the Lord. Right. We read in the several times in the second canto, third canto, the universal form, how the universal form is made of various material ingredients. So he says that Vishnu Chakravarti said this is one understanding, and the second understanding is that it was done for preaching purposes. That while the Lord's body was completely spiritual, but because he wanted to demonstrate how a liberated soul becomes disinterested in the material body, he acted in that way. So Prabhupada says that as far as Rishabdev is concerned, it is already explained, idam shariram mam durvibhayam. He does not at all possess a material body, and therefore he was tolerant of all the troubles offered to him by the bad elements in society. Consequently, he could tolerate people throwing stool and dust upon him and beating him. His body was transcendental and consequently did not at all suffer pains. He was always situated in his spiritual bliss. And Srila Prabhupada also explains how one can appreciate the presence of the Lord as the super soul in unclean places, like dogs and hogs, because even though they are material, the Lord is always spiritual. So by making this distinction that material contaminations do not contaminate the Lord, one can begin to appreciate the spiritual aspect of things that are materially degraded. And earlier we were having this discussion between one who has the vision of the Atma and the Paramatma. And the one with the vision of the Paramatma, he actually sees the pristine form of the Lord in all situations. Right? Prabhupada here expands on that since the Lord is situated in everyone's heart, he is in the heart of hogs and dogs also. If hogs and dogs in the material body live in filthy places, one should not think that the Supreme Lord also lives in a filthy place. Although Lord Rishabdev was maltreated by bad elements, he was not at all affected. Therefore, Swa Mahima Avasthena, he was situated in his own glory. Right? Now, the importance of understanding these points is by contextually understanding, right? So one cannot extrapolate it and say that the deities are not different from the Lord, and because the Lord is always pure and he is always transcendental to dirtiness, so no need to keep the deities clean. Right? Even if the deities are dirty, then the Lord is still present there, and the Lord can never become unclean. So the fallacy in that is that yes, it's true that the deities, if they're properly installed and worshipped, they're completely spiritual. But then there is also so much care that is given to the cleanliness and purity in handling the deities, not because the deities need it, but because those who are worshipping the deities need it. And Prabhupada would talk about two things most important in deity worship: cleanliness and punctuality. And somebody might say, why punctuality? What is the big thing? It's not like an army regiment where as soon as in our temple, we actually have an atomic clock. And literally speaking, when the second hand moves, then the pujaris knock at the door to enter and begin their seva. And then somebody might say that, why all this almost military-like precision? Not for the deities, not entirely for the deities. Right? It's for those who are worshipping the deities. The Lord is always transcendental. But the consciousness of those who are worshipping him is not always transcendental. So the qualities of cleanliness and purity, they are prominent in the mode of goodness. And one at least needs to be in the mood of goodness to start appreciating the transcendental goodness of the Lord, right? So one needs to be to come closer to that level. I mean, we see exalted devotees like Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, like Sanatan Goswami, like he was carrying Madan Mohan in a sack around his shoulder, around his neck, actually, right? That was his worship of the deities. But then the same personality installed one of the most magnificent temples to worship the Lord. His worship was the same there. He was at that level where whether he was feeding the Lord boiled, whatever hard-baked remnants of flour or chapan bhog, right? His consciousness was the same. So he did not need cleanliness and purity as much as we do, because if we start treating the deities with in a casual way, right, our consciousness will become contaminated. Okay, so I'm going to stop over here and see if there is any comments or discussion.
Prabhu, I just have a kind of a silly question actually, but
We lost you, Prabhu. Can't hear you.
and did all those kinds of things.
Prabhu,
He tolerated.
Prabhu, we lost you. We couldn't hear you for a long time. Can you repeat from the beginning your question?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that here we see Lord Rishabdev being mistreated by everybody, many people. That is offensive. So, but he didn't take any offense. He was not bothered by any of these bad things. So, what happens to those people who treat him like that? Do they get implicated, or because we see Mahaprabhu does not take offense, so we tend to. It's not that we should not take it casual, but we tend to give a new devotees to make advancement. It is safe to have Mahaprabhu Gaurnita deities rather than Radha Krishna deities, for example. So we give that because even though they commit some offenses knowingly or unknowingly, they will be forgiven. So what is the condition of these people who are offending Rishabdev like that?
It's a very good question, Prabhu. So you draw parallels, right? You're saying that Mahaprabhu doesn't take offense, so we give his deities to those who may commit offenses, and are they culpable for that? The answer to that is no. They're not, because they're not knowingly committing offenses. So I'm going out on a limb over here because I haven't actually read the answer to this. I'm not able to deduce the answer, but I'm just deducing it from the excellent analogy that you've given yourself. That if you extrapolate it, yes, those people, whatever they were doing, they were not doing to the personality of Godhead. They were doing it to a mad person. So, so one can understand that they would not be held responsible. Lord Rishabdev was doing it for preaching purposes. So he was doing it to demonstrate the behavior of an Avadut, and for that he needed people to act in this way. Going again to the analogy of Mahaprabhu, that the reason that the deities of Mahaprabhu may be worshipped without complete purity is is because of the dispensation from their end. They say it's okay. Right. So if a person comes and says it's okay if you if you treat me in this way, it's okay, I don't mind it. It's a dispensation is from the person that I don't mind it. So dispensation is generally, like, like if a person is, let's say, mentally challenged, right, and the person comes and he behaves in a bad way, person says that's okay, it's fine, and don't worry about it. Other person who's not mentally challenged, he comes and starts speaking this way, that person says no, you should not act in that way, right? So Mahaprabhu's dispensation is there, but does not mean that it's for everyone.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I was actually thinking of a different way. I mean, the same point, but from a different angle. In Mahaprabhu's Leela, we see that when he was saying Gopi, Gopi, his students were actually offensive towards him. And, they made a scheme. They said, if he's going to behave like this, we are going to get back at him. And so therefore it is said that, different events leading to this, and he took sannyas because if people give him respect for the position of sannyas, they will still receive benefit. And so I don't know, it just seems like they will be culpable for that, at least from that Leela of Mahaprabhu.
Yeah. So this goes back to the point I was making, that that the whole process of preaching is multifaceted, right? The same personality Mahaprabhu, in order to protect the people from Vaishnava Prad, he took sannyas, and the same person gave benedictions to Jagai Madai. The same personality, he was happy when Chota Haridas committed suicide, saying he deserves to commit suicide. So, Mahavadanya, right? He's Mahavadanya. And Chota Haridas was his ardent follower. And for relatively small offense, he banished him. So, applying philosophy to preaching needs to be done with an overabundance of understanding of context. Now, when we talk about these seemingly contrary actions, it does not mean that the personality is acting whimsically, right? It does not mean that there's a difference in the desire of Lord Rishabdev and Mahaprabhu, or there's a difference in Mahaprabhu acting in different stages of his life to different people. The underlying intention is always the same, but overabundance of caution, in the sense of one should clearly understand what the context is. Chota Haridas was very dear to Mahaprabhu, and he wanted to use him as an example to show that sannyasi should never associate with women. The consequences of even remotely associating with a woman are stringent. But then, Jagai and Madai, who had outraged the modesty of so many women, and Mahaprabhu said, okay, don't worry about it. Now you're pure devotees. And that time, basically, the potency of the mercy of another devotee was being glorified. But because Nityananda Prabhu gave them the mercy, Mahaprabhu gave them the mercy. So in preaching, difficult to take the yardstick of philosophy and try to evaluate it. Does not mean that one does not take it, but takes it along with the context and see which aspect of philosophy is being manifested over here.
Prabhu, there's a famous saying, time, place, and circumstances.
Exactly. Kal, Desh, and Patra. Right? Very relevant for preaching. Okay, very good. So we'll end over here. If you can stop the recording, Prabhu, Prem Kishore Prabhu. And I just wanted to speak for a few minutes